I know I need to hire, but I'm super busy. In just a few months, I'm sure things will get a lot calmer and I'll take care of it then. This kind of logic is the kind of stuff I hear from small business clients all the time. We just hope that someday time will magically open up and we'll have all the time in the world to build our systems, hire our people, and go work on the important work. The reality is, as I think we both know, that someday never really comes, and you just keep waiting and waiting and waiting till you have time, only to realize time's never going to come for you. You've got to make it. And I say all this without judgment, but as someone who gets it. I definitely held on to things for far too long. If I had delegated earlier on, my business would have grown so much faster. But instead, I wasted hours and hours doing things I should have just had someone else do because I was afraid and overwhelmed by the idea of delegating. And now I see my clients falling into that same trap. So today, I thought I'm going to take you through what I want to send to my clients, which is a walkthrough piece by piece of how I actually hire freelancers today. This is my full behind the scenes process of just what I found to be very helpful. Getting clear on this and understanding each of the steps took delegation from being something I'd put off, I'd dread, and I'd avoid to something that can be done relatively quickly and not even by me. In fact, I've actually delegated delegating, where there are now team members who can execute this process for us. Now, before I go into the exact spreadsheets I use to make sure all of this runs super smoothly, we need to start with the very first step of this 6-step approach, which is confirming it's a real need. You see, after my avoidance of delegation for a long time, when I actually did sit down and say, you know what, I should probably hire help, I did what most of my clients seem to do, which is I hired help for something that was fundamentally useless. I hired help for social media. Yeah, as a business who got no business from social media, didn't really do social media, I thought, you know what, if I have money, let's spend it on social media. Wrong. Wrong. The very first step I now do when delegating is to make sure whatever I'm looking to get off of my plate is proven in some way. Like I know it's the right bet because either I've seen it work for myself or by getting rid of this thing, I'm going to be able to go make some more money by doing something else with my time. As basic as it sounds, I don't want to delegate and spend money unless it's going to make me more money or some other form of value in return. And yet this tends to trip a lot of people up. So much so that I actually made a whole other video on how you can make sure the thing you're hiring for is actually worth hiring for up at the top. But once we have this in place and we have confirmed it is a real need, we are ready for the second step. And this is where the rubber hits the road. We need to start defining the scope of what exactly we are delegating. For myself, I like to do this in 2 categories of deliverables. So deliverables just means, what do I want to have delivered? How do I know this contractor is done giving me what I need? If the terminology is tripping you up, I want you to think about the scope of work section in your contract. What are the bullet points that say what you are exactly doing? That is the deliverable section. Now, I promised you some real-world examples, so let's go through 3 lists of actual deliverables I had for 3 contract roles I've actually hired in the last quarter. Number 1, YouTube editor. Yep, I needed to hire a YouTube editor. Their job is pretty clear. I need someone who can take a pile of raw footage and make a video that is coherent and eliminates most of my rambling nonsense without making it completely soulless. You know what I mean. Ugh! Okay, let's try that again. That's it. That's my one deliverable I need from an amazing YouTube editor. Second example, ProcessDriven coach. We have coaches that we hire to facilitate sessions with our clients. There are 4 deliverables we need from them. Number 1, we need them to conduct audits, review a bunch of information and understand it and ask smart questions. Number 2, we need them to host calls and host them well. Number 3, we need them to create certain templates and deliverables along the way. And number 4, we need them to be proactive in between. So if anything's messed up, they need to be like the type of people who just reach out and take care of it. And yes, that 4th deliverable is a little bit more of a squishy one, but we were able to measure it. I'll be talking about how we actually measure these deliverables as we get into the next phase. Okay, 3rd contract we were hiring for. Fit advisor. This is someone who's going to take calls with our potential customers and help them assess what is the best next step for them to systemize their business. We needed a bunch of traits here, like honesty, intelligence, ability to ask great questions, but most importantly, in terms of deliverables, they needed to host these discovery calls with excellence. One deliverable for this role, and we just need to hire the perfect people for it. So go ahead, grab a piece of paper, grab a notebook, bullet out what deliverables are you actually asking for, including numbers wherever possible for the delegation you need to take care of. Pause this here if you need to, and then let's continue. Once we have the actual deliverables, I like to take it a step further and start defining how do we test for someone's ability to do these things. Now, sometimes this is easy. When it comes to the YouTube editor, guess what? I gave them a raw video and I saw if they could edit it. That's it. The best case is to have someone show that they can do it by actually doing it, and that was very straightforward. Now, sometimes real work, even though it's the gold standard, isn't possible to do as a trial. For example, the fit advisor. I couldn't just put my potential customers to meet with a stranger who I didn't know as their first impression. That's just weird. But I could get damn close. And how we did this is by having fake discovery calls where the client was me. Yeah, me. And because I needed my discovery call people to be able to be really good at improv, I didn't tell them this was coming. They would book a call to talk about the role, and then surprise, I would tell them 10 minutes in that they're going to lead this as if it was a discovery call. One thing to note is when you're hiring for contractors, you are not training people. This is not an employee position. Keep in mind your own laws and permissions and all this other stuff. But my mentality is you are a trained professional and I'm renting your skills for a specific purpose. And so you should be able to perform without any guidance or warning or anything else, given the type of role I was hiring for. And so that's exactly what we did. We did discovery calls where I was the client with a whole string of potential fit advisors before finding the folks we actually moved forward. We took a very similar approach when it came to the actual coach position, where we would break down things to be actual tasks someone could do, except the actual work was for a fake client, which was us, or inspired by a real client that existed. We broke this up into multiple phases of trial deliverables, which were essentially the same as the real thing with some small tweaks. Now, I should say, I'm sharing all of this as what has worked for me. What I'm not sharing with you is all the things that haven't worked. I've made a lot of mistakes around hiring contractors. I'm sure I will continue to do. One of the mistakes, though, I want to warn you about is making trial deliverables that do not align with the real deliverables you want. At one point when we were hiring coaches, we had them come in and actually work as assistants for a short time. So we would hire them for the contract of, processing some notes or supporting on a template setup, helping out with a specific scope so we could kind of see how they worked in action. The problem was what we were testing for there didn't match what they'd ultimately be doing. And not only did it become an incredibly frustrating process, we ended up attracting the wrong people. We would attract people who wanted to be an assistant, who expected employee onboarding, and just generally did not bring that professional rented skill set that we ultimately were looking for. So when you're going through this process and defining your trial deliverables, please, please, please remember, only trial the things that will actually indicate whether they can do the job, not other things that seem normal or seem safe. Okay, now on to the teacher side of things. I call it the teacher side because this next step is where we want to define our grading criteria. This is something that's actually inspired by one of my team members, Sarah, who is very, very good about pushing us in this direction. You see, anytime we would create a test project or a trial or even an interview, we would create a scorecard in a spreadsheet. On the left side of the spreadsheet, we would list out people's names. And on the top of the spreadsheet, we would look at each thing that we are evaluating somebody on. For example, in a test project that we had for a customer support role at one point, we needed someone who could respond to emails. And so we actually had a question that said, hey, this person complained about our newsletter being annoying. How do you respond? So they just write their response. But if we just left it open-ended, it would take me forever to evaluate who did a great job, who didn't do a great job. So what we actually do is define grading criteria for that question. In that case, we created criteria of number 1, did they address the issue? Number 2, did they unsubscribe the person? Number 3, was it typo free? And number 4, did the email make sense? This might sound really simple, but defining the criteria for you is going to be super important so you can cut through the noise, especially as you have multiple contractors filling in this trial deliverable. Oh, by the way, if you want a copy of my spreadsheet that I'm using to keep track of all of this grading stuff, I will actually link that in the description below. You can grab it for free. If you don't naturally think in this kind of grid format and grading criteria feels challenging, another way to think about this is what would be true if this person did a great job. For some people, that's an easier way to unlock this way of thinking. Like you might say, oh, well, it's really clear, it's kind of funny, it's short, whatever it might be. That is going to be your criteria for evaluating candidates. You might also find, as you see a few of them come in, the criteria becomes more obvious to you. That's all right as well. If you actually did a more traditional hiring process where you had an interview involved, we even do the same kind of grading for every question we ask in an interview as well. It's really, really tempting. And I've even seen my own team do this, where we're evaluating people and the reason they move forward is because they're nice. And I love nice people. But nice people can't necessarily do the job. In fact, there was an example just a few weeks ago where we had somebody who was incredibly nice. And this person, was going through our whole interview process. And finally, they reached the last stage of evaluation, which is when I come in and check, do we want to move this person on to the next stage? Because at this particular role, I wanted to check in on it. And I looked at it and I was like, what? This person was missing the number one requirement for the role, which was availability. In the very first step, we said if people are not available, they don't move on. But because this person was so nice, we gifted them wasted time. They should have been rejected based on the criteria that we objectively set. But because they were so nice, we didn't follow our own policy. And that was a correction that we had to make, where it was like, hey guys, what are we doing here? And it's something that I think you'll probably be guilty of as well, unless you really make sure your criteria is crystal clear. Easy yes, no criteria for how you know what good looks like. All right, horror stories aside, we've gotten through the worst of it. We know we have a defined need. We've made clear deliverables. We know what the trial deliverables will be, and we have grading criteria. So we know exactly what good looks like and what our standards are. So we can't backslide if someone's too nice. Now we are ready for the next phase, which, if you are someone who's blasting this from the rooftops, might be an application. In our case at ProcessDriven, when we post a job, we tend to get a lot of applicants, especially if we post on Indeed. We'll regularly get 500 to 1,000 applicants. And I do not want to review that many test projects, and I don't want to pay for that many test projects. And so we usually do an early application with a few basic questions. Again, we grade these and only the top people move on. But whether we do this screening step or we go right to the test project, eventually our goal is to get to the test project, where we take those trial deliverables and we then pay people to deliver them. Yes, I said pay. I know there is a popular trend of doing free test projects, and I will say if we're asking somebody to do 30 minutes of work, we might do it for free as well. But for most roles, especially roles that are contract, 30 minutes of work doesn't really tell us anything except how well can they Google. And so what we'll tend to do is pay a little bit more and require a larger amount of work. I think our typical test project has been about 5 hours of work for about $500 US. And we do that as a courtesy to make it very clear to the candidates that we want them to take this seriously and that we respect their time. Because of that compensation, I usually keep my pool down to about 2 to 8 people. So if I'm hiring a YouTube editor, I might be looking at just 2 to 3. If I'm looking for a coach, we might actually be looking closer to 6 to 8 people going through this, because I just know I'm going to be weeding a lot of people out once we see their actual work. Your exact budget and the role you're looking for is going to determine the right quantity for you. But I would say, generally speaking, test projects of $0 to $1,000 with 2 to 3 people is a pretty good baseline. Of course, if these are smaller jobs, like it's just a $20 project, maybe you want to do 10 of those just to get more at bats. It's kind of your own call. But this is really where you can see the reality of what can this person do, not based on some glowy resume, but the actual work. Now, usually within a day or 3 from posting that job and getting some applications in, you will actually have people submitting the test project, whether it's through a paid response to your Upwork listing or submitting it through your own forms like we do here. When that happens, it's time to grade and respond. Personally, I like to grade and respond in a batch, but I will always favor people who turn in things early. There's this line that Seth Godin said, the reason they call it a deadline is because if you get close to it, you're dead. And I really like bringing that forward, especially for roles where I want speed, responsiveness, and accuracy all kind of bundled together. I want to see who can deliver in a timely manner. If someone submits after the deadline or has a bunch of questions before they get there, they'll still be paid for this project, but they're not going to be moving forward. And if someone doesn't submit the project, I'm not going to be paying them, and we just all go on our merry way. This grading process takes me about 5 minutes per assessment in most cases because we've made such clear yes or no responses. And candidly, when I go through them, it is usually painfully obvious who is the right choice. There's usually 1 or 2 people that are head and shoulders above everyone else. and then we act from there. I will send off, respectful, hey, we're not moving forward anymore messages to those who I've paid, but we're not going to proceed. And to those who do seem like a good fit, we move on to the very last stage. Every so often, I will not have this kind of sensation of, oh my God, you're the best, in which case I might repeat this one more time. The nice thing about this is once you have the infrastructure, you can hire for that same role infinitely if you need to. Of course, there's a cost of these test projects, but it's more important to me to hire the right person than for it to be the first time around. In fact, often the second time around, you get a higher caliber of person because you're able to tweak your questions a little bit and really seek out the right candidate. And yes, I am using the word candidates here, even though we're talking about contractors or freelancers. You know what I mean. Once we've gotten through the testing process and maybe we've had to go through once more, we are ready to move on to the real work. And this is where we take one or two of our top people from the hiring process and we set them loose on real projects. What I like to do is say, hey, I'd love to hire you. I'd love to go with the agreed upon scope, send me your contract or whatever else we need to do. But to start off, I'd like to start with just a few units. So if it's YouTube videos, I might say 4 videos. Or if it's calls, I'd like to say 8 calls. Pick a small scope that gives you a larger sample, but still makes sense for that contractor. Ultimately, contractors and freelancers are business owners. They don't want to do nickel and dime projects for no reason, which I completely understand. But we don't want to agree to a never-ending, $60K a month retainer without actually having a chance to work with somebody. So this real-world trial contract is where I like to go next. If we have a contractor who does not have their own service agreement or contract, we will create one for ourselves because, frankly, I've been doing this too long to be able to work with anybody without a solid contract. And in our own contracts, we try to just specify, hey, this is a trial for this long, and if we both like each other, we can continue. All in one contract, just to keep it super simple and kind of cover everyone's butts. By framing it as a trial, we make it very clear that we're both just testing the waters still. This also frees you up to potentially hire multiple people for the real thing. For 2 of the 3 roles I gave as examples earlier on, I actually hired 2 to 3x the number of people I actually needed into the real world trial because I really wanted to see who would work out. In some cases, I planned on keeping multiple people. In other cases, I was really hoping to just find my top 1. But in either instance, it wasn't clear to me from the earlier phase who was going to be the best fit. So I figured, well, might as well pay them both with mutual understanding and just move forward in the real world and see who rises above. And as with the test project, it became very obvious very quickly who the right people were for the actual work once we were in the real world. But one of the questions that's going to come up at this time is, okay, this all sounds great, but I don't have time. So what can I do? Well, I actually compulsively track my time. So I can tell you going through this whole process for our most recent role took me a total of 6 hours when I was doing it myself. I also have roles that I've used this approach that I haven't been directly doing. I actually delegated the delegating. And in those cases, it took me about 1 hour of my time to be involved while everything else was done by a team member I trusted. So 6 hours or 1 hour, still 30 minutes a day, 1 hour a day. Odds are you have the time to do this kind of process if we aren't overcomplicating it, over-engineering it, wasting hours writing SOPs in anticipation of it. A lot of the stuff we think we have to do in order to hire contractors is just us procrastinating getting the actual shit done. And so if this is something that you think might be helpful to you, I encourage you to take action and make it happen. Start doing this today. And again, this spreadsheet is for free in the description below. And of course, if you want to make sure the people you're hiring are actually performing and doing the things you need to make sure your business grows, be sure to watch this video on the end screen because frankly, having people is great, but unless those people are driving the key metrics in your business, particularly these ones, it's not going to work out well for you. So be sure you watch this video next and enjoy the process.